So as y'all know, there's a new FHDS form. There is a new FHDS form. And then there's a, you've heard of the books, you know, Real Estate for Dummies or Golf for Dummies or all that. There's also an FHDS for Dummies that I'm going to show you in just a minute. And so what happened was this form has been confusing, right? It's been a point of confusion of what are people supposed to do, what are the seller's requirements, how is this supposed to be treated? And so CAR, because there was so much confusion and there were so many people calling, asking questions, they just simply revised the form to make it more idiot-proof. And so what it comes down to, how we use this form could be different. So you have to read it, and the seller has to make a determination. It could be under paragraph B, and I've cut some of it away. This is not the actual form. I'm going to talk about the specific parts of the form that are important for you that are different. And so under paragraph B, where it starts, or actually it starts in paragraph A, where there is a local compliance requirement. So you either check the property is or is not subject to a local vegetation management ordinance requiring defensible space around the improvement of the property. Doesn't say at close of escrow, doesn't say you know, that it can be done before or after the close of escrow. It asks, is there a vegetation local compliance requirement?
Yes.
Is there?
Yes.
Okay, so every seller would check yes, that is, not yes, but they would check the first part of it, which is if, because the property is located in that area. And we move to paragraph B, and there are several options there. The first is that the seller is unaware that the property is in compliance with the applicable state or local defensible space law. Seller does not have a report prepared by an authorized defensible space inspector. So if they don't have any knowledge whether or not it is compliant or not, they would check that box, right? So there would be a certain percentage of our clients, especially if they've never been here, right? They haven't ever seen the property. That could be an instance. You know, it could be that they are unaware. There are people in the world that are unaware, right? Of things, and so they might not be aware of it. Paragraph two, or the second choice is property is in compliance with the state or local defensible space law, whichever is applicable. If state law applies, seller must have obtained compliance within the last 6 months. Seller shall deliver to buyer documentation of compliance. So they check that box if they actually went through the steps. They were a good citizen, because there is a requirement that you do it. You all should do it on your home, right? Make sure that you have defensible space. So if they're a good citizen and they've done that, then they check box B. And then more commonly, we're going to check box 3. Okay, so most of the time I would say you're probably going to check box 3, which is property is not in compliance with the state or local defensible space law, whichever is applicable. The seller has or agrees to obtain. So this is where the idiot proofness comes in. It's saying if seller has or agrees to, the other form is kind of unclear on what the seller's requirement was. But if the seller has or agrees to obtain a report prepared by an authorized defensible space inspector, seller shall deliver subject to within 3 days of seller's execution. Okay, so if it's not in compliance, then they would check that box. Then you move to paragraph C, which is what is the buyer and seller's agreement? Because there's no requirement that it necessarily, at least for here in San Bernardino County, there is no requirement that the seller do anything. So you have multiple choices here. Buyer responsibility, no local ordinance. This paragraph is box 1. Let me move up. Buyer and seller agreement regarding which party shall obtain compliance with the applicable state or local defensible space requirements. What that tells you is this is negotiable. It's not something that is cast in stone. The seller or the buyer are required to do anything. It's a negotiable item. So you either check box 1, which is buyer's responsibility. There is no local ordinance. Buyer shall obtain documentation of compliance with the state defensible space law within 1 year of the close of escrow. Okay. Box B, buyer responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which requires compliance as a result of the sale of the property. Would you ever check box 2? You would not, because it does not apply. Buyer's responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance effect, which does not require compliance as a result of the sale of the property. Buyer shall obtain documentation of compliance with the state defensible space law within 1 year of the close of escrow, or applicable comply with the local requirement after close of escrow. Would you check that box? Yes. Box 3 in most instances is going to be checked because you want to shift that responsibility to the buyer. And then it goes on, seller's responsibility, seller's responsibility, seller's responsibility. You could, that could be checked. That could be, well, let's just say, let's just go through it. Seller responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which requires compliance as a result of the sale of property. You're not going to ever check box 4. Box 5, state local compliance already complete, that could be checked if it's already been done, or if it's allowed to be done after the fact. Okay. Excuse me, seller shall obtain documentation for compliance and deliver to buyer prior to the time for the file's final verification of conditions. So it's not after the fact. And then you have the opportunity to fill out and complete the form to put in the local agency for which, and what is that local agency? CAL FIRE. Yeah, and so we will provide that. I'm going to send this out to you with the idiot, the golf, or the, excuse me, the fire hardening disclosure of idiots document. So we'll have that. Any questions on this?